He was 30 years old when they came for him. He had been in that prison for 2 years. He had been in Egypt for 13. And in all of that time, nobody had asked him a single question about who he was. They asked him to work. He worked. They asked him to run the other prisoners, and he ran them. And he did it well enough that the man in charge of the jail stopped checking on him entirely, which is the highest compliment a Capricorn ever receives, and the loneliest one. Then one morning, the door opened and the guards were in a hurry. There is a detail in that story that almost everyone reads straight past. The text says they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. Hastily. 13 years of absolutely nothing, and then suddenly, the kingdom cannot wait another 20 minutes. And before they would let him into the room, he had to stop and shave and change his clothes, because you cannot walk out of a dungeon looking like the dungeon and stand where he was about to stand. That is the part I want you to hold on to. Not the promotion, the shaving. Because 13 years of that man's life moved at the speed of stone, and one single morning of it moved faster than he could get himself ready for. And the only reason he could walk into that throne room at all was that he had spent every one of the slow years quietly becoming somebody who could survive the fast one. If you are a Capricorn, nobody has ever needed to explain that story to you. You have been living the first half of it. September is the shave. I am going to give you 7 reasons why September is the biggest month of your life, and before I do, I want to be honest with you about what that phrase means, because the internet has completely destroyed it. I am not telling you that money is going to appear. I am not telling you that a stranger is going to walk into your life and fix the part of it you have not been able to fix in 6 years. That is not what this channel does, and you would not believe me anyway, because you are a Capricorn, and Capricorn has a very reliable internal alarm for anybody promising something for nothing. Here is what I am actually telling you. For most of the last 2 years, the sky has been doing demolition work on your chart. Quiet, structural, unglamorous demolition, the kind that happens behind a wall. In September, 4 separate things finish at once, and the sky stops taking things apart and starts putting a floor down. And when that happens to a Capricorn specifically, it does not feel like celebration. It feels like being handed the bill and the keys in the same envelope. So let us go through all 7 properly with the actual mechanism underneath each one. And I want to warn you now that the 7th one is the one that will cost you something, and I am going to ask you to do it anyway. Reason 1. On the 22nd of September, the sun walks into the highest room in your chart, and it will stay there for a month. Start from your own sign and count. Capricorn is the 1st, Aquarius the 2nd, Pisces 3rd, Aries 4th, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and then Libra. Libra is the 10th. The 10th house is not a metaphor. It is a physical place in the sky. It is the part of the heavens that sits directly over your head at noon, the highest point anything can reach before it starts coming back down. Astrologers call it the midheaven, and it has meant the same thing in every tradition that has ever used it. Standing, reputation, the version of you that exists in other people's mouths when you are not in the room. On the 22nd of September, the sun crosses the equator. Day and night come out exactly equal, and the sun begins its month at the top of a Capricorn chart. Now here is the part that matters, and it is the part that gets sold badly everywhere else. The sun does not build anything. The sun has never built anything in its life. The sun illuminates. It takes what is already standing there and makes it impossible not to see. Which means September is not the month you start. September is the month the thing you already finished gets looked at. And I know what you are going to do with that information because I know Capricorn. You are going to hear that the spotlight is coming and you are going to decide the work is not ready yet. You are going to want to spend 3 more weeks on it. You have a nearly religious belief that visibility should be earned twice. Once by doing the work, and once again by suffering about whether the work is good enough. Do not do that this month. The lighting is changing whether your work is finished or not, and it is going to light up whatever is standing there on the 22nd. Make sure something is standing there. They did not give Joseph 13 years and then ask him to prepare a presentation. They opened a door and told him to hurry. The preparation had already happened. It had been happening the entire time. In a basement, where nobody was watching. which is precisely why it was real. Reason 2. Jupiter is sitting in Leo, and from your sign, Leo is the 8th house. Jupiter is the planet of increase. It is the only body in the chart whose entire job is to make whatever it touches bigger. And right now, it is standing in the 8th house of every Capricorn alive. The 8th house has a bad reputation it does not deserve. People hear 8th house and they think death. That is a bad translation of a much more interesting idea. The 8th house is the house of everything that is not yours. Shared money, inherited money, debt, the salary that somebody else signs off on, the resources you are trusted to manage that belong to another person. It is the house of things that come to you through a decision that is not your decision. And that is why Jupiter in your 8th house is going to be genuinely uncomfortable for you, even while it is being good to you. Because Capricorn's entire private religion is self-sufficiency. You would rather do it alone and slowly than owe anyone a favor. You have a very specific dread of being in a position where someone else has to decide whether you get the thing. You will build the whole staircase yourself rather than ask one person for a ladder. Jupiter in your 8th house does not care. The increase this month is not coming from your own hand. It is arriving through somebody else's yes. Read what actually happened to Joseph. He did not build Egypt. He did not accumulate anything. He was standing in a prison with no assets, no title, no property, and no legal status, and a man he had helped 2 years earlier finally remembered his name in front of the king. The text is brutal about that gap, by the way. It says the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him for 2 entire years, and then remembered. And the whole thing turned. So here is the instruction that comes with reason 2, and it is the one most of you will skip. There is something you are owed. A payment, a promotion, a credit for work with your fingerprints on it, and somebody else's name attached, an answer that has been pending so long, you have quietly decided to stop wanting it. In September, ask once, plainly, without the 4 sentences of apology in front of it that you normally use to make the asking smaller. The 8th house does not reward silent competence. It rewards the person whose name is in the room. Reason 3. Saturn is retrograde in Aries, and Aries is the floor of your chart. Understand what Saturn is to you, because it is not the same as it is for anyone else. For everybody else, Saturn is a visitor that shows up every 7 years to check the work. For you, Saturn is the entire operating system. It is the thing that made you like this. Your patience, your endurance, your suspicion of easy answers, your unnerving ability to wait longer than the situation deserves. All of it is Saturn, and your ruler is currently walking backwards. Saturn is retrograde in Aries, and from Capricorn, Aries is the 4th house, the lowest point of the chart, the midnight position. Home, family, the house you were raised in, the floor, everything else is standing on. Retrograde does not mean broken, and it does not mean punishment. It means review. Saturn goes back over ground it has already covered to inspect the work it did the first time. It is a building inspector walking through a structure it signed off on and pulling at the joints. And it is not doing that alone. Neptune is in Aries too. Saturn and Neptune in the same sign is one of the defining transits of this entire year. And for you, both of them are standing in the room your foundation is in. Those 2 planets are opposites in the most literal way. Saturn is the hardest edge in astrology. It deals only in what is verifiably there. Neptune is the softest thing in the chart. It deals in story, in memory, in the gentle fog we put over the parts of our history we were not equipped to look at when they happened. Put them in the same house, and you get one specific experience. The story you have been telling about where you came from is going to be held up against what actually happened, and the 2 are not going to match everywhere. That is not a disaster. That is maintenance. Every family has a version of events that everybody agreed to, usually to protect somebody who could not have survived the accurate version at the time. Saturn retrograde in the 4th house is where the agreement gets renegotiated. And look at how the story handles this, because it does not flinch. Joseph's brothers threw him in a pit and sold him. When they finally stood in front of him again 22 years later, and he had absolute power over whether they lived, he did not forgive them immediately. He tested them for 3 entire chapters. He put them through an elaborate, painful, deliberate sequence to find out whether they were still the men who had done it or whether they had become somebody else. That is Saturn retrograde in the 4th house. Exactly. You do not get to skip to the reconciliation. The foundation gets tested before you build anything on top of it. There is one conversation with your family that you have been carrying, unopened, for somewhere between 2 and 20 years. September is the month it is available. It will not be comfortable, and you will not enjoy it. Have it anyway. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe to the Zodiac Decoded. What I do here is take the sky apart into its actual working parts, so that when a month like September arrives, you can see the machinery instead of just feeling the weather. It is free, and it keeps these coming. And if you are a Capricorn, do something for me in the comments. Do not write a paragraph. Write a year. Just the number, the year you started carrying whatever it is you are still carrying. I read them, and when a few thousand Capricorns put a year in a comment section, the pattern that comes back is more honest than any chart I could draw. Reason 4, Uranus is in Gemini, and Gemini is your 6th house. Uranus is the only planet in the chart that works purely by interruption. It does not negotiate, it does not build up slowly, it does not send a warning. It arrives sideways, and it removes an option you were relying on, and it is currently standing in the 6th house of every Capricorn. The 6th house is the job, not the career, not the reputation. That was the 10th. The 6th is the actual daily thing. The routine, the schedule, the commute, the body, the small unglamorous machinery that gets the week done. The 6th house is where Capricorn genuinely lives. Other signs visit their routines. You are your routine. It is your armor and your pride. And if we are being completely honest with each other, occasionally your hiding place. Uranus in the 6th house means the routine breaks, and you do not get advance notice. For most signs, that reads as bad news. For you, it is the only exit that has ever worked, and I need you to hear why. Capricorn will not leave a situation voluntarily. You will stay in a job 4 years past the point where it stopped teaching you anything, because leaving looks like quitting, and quitting is the single word in the English language you are least able to have attached to your name. You will keep a routine that is quietly costing you something because dismantling it yourself feels like admitting the last 3 years were a mistake. So the sky does it for you. Go back to the story one more time. Everything in Egypt was running perfectly. It was the most organized state in the ancient world. The granaries were full. The administration functioned. Nothing was wrong. And then one night, a man had a dream that frightened him. And within a single day, the entire 14-year plan of the kingdom changed, and a foreigner came out of a prison to run it. Joseph did not engineer that. He could not have. The interruption arrived from outside, uninvited, and it was the only door that was ever going to open. Here is the instruction. When your schedule breaks in September, and something in it will, do not repair it the same day. That is your reflex, and it is the wrong one. Give it 48 hours before you put the order back. Look at the shape of the gap first. Uranus never removes something without showing you what it was standing in the way of. Reason 5. Pluto is in Aquarius, and Aquarius is your 2nd house. This is the one that changes your price. I need to give you some history first, because this transit only makes sense with it. From 2008 until 2024, Pluto was inside Capricorn. 16 years. Understand what that actually means. The planet whose only function is demolition and reconstruction stood inside your identity, your body, your name, your face for 16 consecutive years. If you have ever had the feeling that you are not remotely the same person you were in 2008 and that you cannot fully explain where the old one went, you are not being dramatic, and it was not a failure of character. Something was standing in your 1st house taking the walls down, and it did not ask permission, and it did not go quickly. It finished. It moved into Aquarius, and from your sign, Aquarius is the 2nd house. The 2nd house is usually described as money and possessions, which is true and also lazy. Underneath money, there is a much more uncomfortable question, which is what you believe you are worth. Your salary is a number somebody else agreed to. Your price is a number you agreed to first, usually a long time ago, usually before you had any information. Pluto is standing on that number now, and Pluto does not adjust things. It does not raise you by 9%. It takes the thing down to the ground and rebuilds it out of different material. And this is where Joseph gets almost unbearably precise. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver. That was the market price of that man on that afternoon, agreed by his own brothers, and nobody involved thought it was unreasonable. 13 years later, the same man was in charge of the entire food supply of the ancient world, and the same brothers came and stood in front of him and did not recognize him. Nothing about him changed. He was the same person in the pit and on the throne. The valuation changed, so here is your September instruction, and this is the one that Capricorns write to me about afterwards. Name the number out loud. Once. To the person who can actually do something about it. Not the number you think you can get away with asking for, and not the one that feels safe because it is only slightly more than what you have now. The real one. You do not have to win that conversation. You have to have it. Pluto in the second house is not moved by what you deserve. It is moved by what you are willing to say out loud. Reason 6, Mercury does not go retrograde in September, and that is not a small detail this year. It is the whole reason the month works. Mercury turns retrograde again in the second half of October, and it stays that way well into November. That means September is a completely clean corridor. Contracts signed in September hold. Conversations you start in September land roughly where you aimed them. Decisions made in September do not have to be revisited 3 weeks later, because a piece of information was sitting under a rock the entire time. Now put that in the context of the last few weeks, and you will see the shape of it. August was 2 eclipses inside 16 days. Eclipses take things away. That is their function, and it is not negotiable, and most of you have been walking around since the middle of August with something missing and no explanation for it. Then October and November arrive with Mercury reversed, which is the stretch where you find out that half of what you were told in October was incomplete. September sits exactly between those two. It is the only structurally clean month in that entire run. 1 month of ordinary, uninterrupted, functioning time, with the demolition behind you and the confusion not yet arrived. And you know what the story does with this, because it is the most Capricorn passage in the entire Bible. Joseph interprets the dream and tells Pharaoh there will be 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. And then he does the thing that nobody in that room wanted to hear. He says, "Let them gather all the food of those good years. Store it. Put it in warehouses. Do not enjoy the 7 good years as 7 good years. Treat them as 7 years of preparation for the ones you cannot see yet." Everyone in Egypt could see the abundance. It was not hidden. The difference between the people who survived and the people who did not was entirely whether they treated a good season as a party or as a warehouse. Joseph is the patron saint of the boring answer, and so are you. And September is a warehouse month. Sign the thing. Send the contract. Move the money. Have the conversation that requires precision. You have a narrow, clean, well-lit corridor, and it closes in the second half of October. Reason 7. At the end of September, the moon comes full in Aries, in the sign your own ruler is standing in, and that is where the month collects its debt. This is the one that costs you something. A full moon in Aries at the end of September lands in the same sign Saturn is occupying, which is your 4th house, the floor. And it arrives 1 month after the lunar eclipse of the 28th of August, which is not a coincidence, because that is how eclipse seasons resolve. The eclipse removes something. The full moon that follows it in the same season is where you finally get shown what the empty space was for. For you, that reveal is happening in the room where you came from. And so, we come back to the moment the whole story has been walking towards, which is not the throne, and it is not the granaries. 22 years after his brothers sold him, Joseph is standing in a room with them, holding every card. He has power, he has anonymity, he has an entire kingdom behind him, and they have nothing. And what he does is clear the room. He sends every Egyptian out, every official, every guard, until there is nobody left standing there who is not family. And then he says 7 words. "I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold." That is it. 22 years of concealment ended by 1 plain sentence, spoken with no audience. The text says he wept so loudly that the Egyptians outside the room heard him through the wall. Now think about what he did not do. He did not have the conversation in front of his staff. He did not make it a performance of forgiveness. He did not soften it into something more comfortable, and he did not skip the hard clause either. He said, "whom ye sold." He named the thing accurately, and then he stayed in the room. That is the seventh reason, and here is why I think it is the biggest one. Capricorn is the sign most likely to have a sentence like that saved up. A true sentence, an accurate one you have been carrying so long that it has become part of the architecture. You have rehearsed it, you have decided 100 times that saying it would cost more than carrying it. And the arithmetic on that has quietly changed over the last few years, and you have not updated it. At the end of September, in your fourth house, with your own ruler standing right there, the room clears. Say it. Not to win. Not to make anyone pay for anything. Say it because you are the only person alive who knows the true version, and because a thing that stays unsaid for long enough stops being a secret and starts being a load-bearing wall, and you are not built to spend another decade holding up a wall made out of something that was never yours to carry in the first place. That is September, the sun at the top of your chart on the 22nd. Jupiter increasing what other people hand you. Saturn walking backwards through your foundation with Neptune beside it. Uranus breaking the routine you would never have left on your own. Pluto standing on your price. One clean month with no interference, and a full moon at the end of it, in the sign of your ruler, in the room you grew up in. One more thing, and then I will let you go. Everybody who tells the Joseph story tells it as a story about a promotion. It is not. 13 years went down, and one morning went up, and the only thing they let that man do in between was shave and change his clothes. That is all September is going to give you. It is not going to hand you Egypt. What it is going to do is open a door and put you in a hurry. And the only people who ever walk through a door like that are the ones who already did the slow, unwitnessed, deeply boring work in the years when nothing was happening and nobody was checking. You have done those years, you are probably still doing them, and you have almost certainly convinced yourself that they do not count for anything, because nobody clapped. They count. That is what the shaving is for. The years are the entire reason you are able to be ready in 20 minutes. If that landed, subscribe to the Zodiac Decoded and stay with me, because I would rather be the one who shows you the machinery than the one who tells you it is all going to be fine. Shave. Change your clothes. The hurry is coming, and it is coming in September.